everyone, and thank you for tuning in. My name is Bruce Buffington.
And I'm Ann Morrow.
And I was waiting for them to pick you up, and I was going to say, well, Ann, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, Bruce. Thank you. And Bruce, I want to take this opportunity to thank Northwest Bicycle Safety Council for our meal this evening, feeding our great crew that helps us out every month.
And I'm sure Northwest Bicycle Safety appreciates that. Thank you. Also, Ann will be interviewing our special guests, Ben Showman and Ron Ing. Now, Ben and Ron are members of the Portland Wheelman Touring Club, and they will be discussing the ups and downs of hosting a bicycle event. Very big topic, and I really can't wait to hear some of those advice and tidbits that they can provide to us. Also, we'd like to welcome our Salem viewers who are watching us on the replays at CCTV. And if you're from Salem and there's some content or some segments that you would like to see that is strictly for the Salem area, some of the activities are going around down there, contact us at www.nwbicyclesafetycouncil.org. Well, Ann, did you get a chance to ride in this past couple of weeks?
I have done a little bit of riding in the winter, and one ride I came out on was your birthday ride in January.
Yes, that was a very good ride. We had a pretty good turnout. And you know, that particular ride was not just about my birthday. It was about the January birthdays of those who showed up for the ride, and everyone got to join in that great big gigantic cookie. Well, there were two gigantic cookies that Nestle Toll House Cafe provided. They donated those, and they decorated these with bicycles and everything. We had about 24 people that took part in that little festivity.
Yeah, it was nice to meet some of your friends, Bruce, and it was a great ride. I like riding on the west side. I live in Vancouver, so it's nice to ride down there and see some of the sights.
Now, I got a chance to get out with the senior rollers. And you know, I've been riding with the senior rollers for some time now. And what I've noticed is that we ride around 10 o'clock in the morning, and in some of the areas at that hour of the morning, there's frost on the ground, and even more so in the shade. It seems like we need to throw out some caution about that kind of riding.
Definitely. Sometimes we might not be thinking about that, especially later in the morning. But like you're saying, in the shaded areas, there might still be some ice or frost. Definitely want to watch out. And some of that gravel from our snow at the Christmas season is still out on the road, and that can kind of take you down too.
I just thought of something.
What's that, Bruce?
Northwest Bicycle Safety Council will be at the Worst Day of the Year ride at the turnaround point at REI, and we're going to provide some snacks and help REI check over bicycles, you know, pump up tires and things like that. And we'll have a lot of educational materials on hand. We'll have some free stuff like the bicycle helmet ID carriers. If you have a need for one of those, just ask. They're free to the public while they last. And there'll be some refreshments and snacks there. And the old REI tradition, and that's the REI at Streets of Tanasbourne, where the midway point is.
Okay.
And so what other rides are coming up between now and Worst Day of the Year ride?
Worst Day of the Year ride? Boy, that's one of the first, Bruce, in early February, as far as like big event rides that you pay to do kind of thing.
Now, we talked about there's some after that.
Yes. Well, and Bruce, isn't Northwest Bicycle Safety Council getting involved in a big ride this summer in August?
We are. August 29th is going to be Tualatin Hills Park Foundation Hike and Bike. It's an annual event. It usually has the family rides, and then they have some walkers in this particular thing. It's very festive, but this year, on August 29th, they're adding a metric century, and Northwest Bicycle Safety Council will be partnering with Tualatin Hills Park Foundation for that ride.
And you've done that ride. I've not done that ride, but it sounds like a great route and very doable for most anyone, as far as a metric century being, I don't know if you said 62 miles.
It's 62 to 63 miles, and that's an extended one if we do a little over 63 miles. However, it's a worthwhile cause because this ride and this whole event is to help, and there are donations for it, but I can't talk about how much because we're not commercial television, but look for the registration announcement. The donations help benefit the poor children and their families, and a portion of the metric century donations will help Northwest Bicycle Safety Council, which provides free helmets to children in schools, bicycle safety fairs, and community events free of charge. It's our biggest fundraiser of the year to raise money for those helmets. Also, Portland Wheelman Touring Club helps us with helmets at the same time, around that time of year as well.
Yeah, definitely. We've got a special fund for helmets. So
now, there were some rides that we talked about that you said that people may not be able to get into because they're full.
Yeah, I want to tell our viewers, Bruce, that some of the rides for 2009 are already filling up. RSVP, which is put on by Cascade Bicycle Club, is a ride from Seattle to Vancouver and Party. It's full. And so is the Oregon Bike Ride, which is organized by someone out of Bend, and they're, I think they do a Washington Bike Ride, also full. Now those kind of only allow about 250 people or so to ride, and they're week-long bike rides, but they're full. Ride Across Washington, put on by Cascade Bicycle Club, is also full already. So if you're thinking about doing Cycle Oregon or some of these other rides, you probably better get busy and be ready to jump. A Cycle Oregon sign-up will start on February 5th. I think they'll have their kickoff party.
And we can't forget that Portland Wheelman Touring Club, REI, and Cascade Bicycle Club have teamed up to put on Seattle to Portland training rides, STP training rides. I know that the one from Streets of Tanasbourne is going to be a real good one.
Because you're going to lead it, huh,
You
Bruce?
got that right. And we're going to keep it interesting. So if this is the first time you've done the STP, whether you want to do it in 2 days or 1 day, which, you know, they do have the one-day ride, which is about 203 miles in that 1 day, we will have a training ride that will help benefit both of those particular events. So if you want to do it in 1 day, come on out and see us. If you want to do it in 2 days, come out and join us anyway. Also, they're going to have rides that are going to start in Portland as well.
Yes, maybe the Pearl District REI, or we haven't gotten everything worked out yet. But yeah, I think the Wheelmen are excited to do this, to help people achieve that goal of doing the Seattle to Portland bike ride. And
there's 2 ways to find out that riding schedule for the west side, being from Streets of Tanasbourne. You can go on www.nwbicyclesafetycouncil.org and click on Bruce's PWTC rides, or you could go right to pwtc.com and look up the ride schedule there as well. Well, Ann, I think that it's time for us to introduce our guest and let you take it away.
All right. Thank you, Bruce. I want to start by talking about the fact that we are heading into the 2009 bicycle season. And so that brings us, as we just spoke about, a lot of event rides coming up. And by event rides, I define an event ride as a ride that you pay for. Typically, you know, $20, maybe more, depending on the ride. Some of these event rides are put on by bike clubs, others by charities, and so sometimes you also need to raise money for a particular charity. But the idea is that you pay for the ride and whoever's organizing it supports you. And that is, they give you a map, they mark a course for you, they feed you at rest stops, they might have sag wagons driving around to help you. So those are event rides as compared to maybe a free club ride or just riding out on your own. So coming up now, we've got in the near future event rides such as Salem Bicycle Club's Monster Cookie Ride in late April, and then Vancouver Bicycle Club's RACC, R-A-C-C, Ride Around Clark County. And then in early June we have the Pioneer Century Portland Wheelman puts on, and our guests tonight are affiliated with that ride. In mid-July we've got Seattle to Portland, STP. And so all these rides are coming up in our future, and they're great goals to set out for yourself to ride stronger, ride longer, and they're just a lot of fun. A good way to see the Northwest by doing these event rides and raising money for different organizations. So our guests tonight, as I said, are affiliated with the Portland Wheelman Touring Club, the Pioneer Century, and to my immediate left here is Ben Schoenman. He's one of the coordinators, and next to him is Ron Ing from the Wheelman. So we're going to talk to them initially about their own riding experience, and then we're going to talk about how do you plan a big event for maybe 1,200 people. And so let's get started. Ron, I wanted to talk to you first. How did you get involved in bicycling as an adult?
Well, actually, it was my failure as a golfer that got me involved in cycling. I was trying to be a golfer, and I would come home more frustrated than I left. And so my wife at that time said, why don't you try to find something else to do? And cycling was always something I enjoyed, and so I got into it more and more.
And what kinds of rides do you typically do then?
I do recreational rides. I don't race. I also enjoy loaded touring, where you put all your camping gear and your tents and everything on your bike and take off for a week.
And I know you did some of that last year. And Ben, I want to ask you the same question. How did you how did you get involved as an adult in riding a bicycle?
I was going through a divorce, and it gave me a golden opportunity to get out of the house.
It's a good stress reliever, regardless. Okay, and how about you? What kinds of rides do you typically do?
Mostly recreational. I don't do any racing. I got turned on to loaded touring this past season and fell in love with it. So I'm looking forward to doing more loaded touring.
Okay. And Ron, I wanted to ask, just thinking back to the 2008 cycling season, what was your favorite bicycle ride last year?
I think my favorite ride was the ride I did from Corvallis to Walport along the Alsea River. The ride was just spectacular scenery, and due to road construction, the road was ours for 40 minutes at a time, and then we'd have a plethora of cars go by, maybe 15 or 20, and then we'd have the road all to ourselves again. And it was just a fantastic day on the bicycle.
And was that when you were doing a loaded tour?
Yes. Yep. We were loaded touring. So while we weren't going fast, because you never can go very fast loaded touring, it was just beautiful scenery. Stop and take it all in.
Now, Ben, I'm going to ask you the same question. I know you two ride together a lot, so I hope you have a different answer.
I do.
What's your favorite?
There was a ride out in the Tri-Cities in Washington.
Oh, yeah.
And it was just real nice to be able to go out into a different part of the country and ride. There was an area called the Horse Heaven Hills up through the wheat fields. Nice wide roads, relatively smooth, minimal chip seal. And just to be able to ride in a different part of the country, I found real enjoyable.
Now, that was an event ride, wasn't it?
Yes, that was.
And what was the name of that ride?
It was called the Inland Empire, put on by the Tri-Cities Bicycle Club.
And I think they're offering that again this year in May.
Yes, they are. Yeah.
Well, let's get down to talking about the Pioneer Century. I'm going to reflect way back to the year of 2007, because you're going into your third year of organizing this ride. But in 2007, you took it over and you changed it for the wheelmen from the Spring Century to the Pioneer Century. And you revamped the route and kind of just modified it. So, Ron, why don't you tell me a little bit about what you did to figure out a route for this, and why did you change the route from the Spring Century to the Pioneer Century that we know?
We changed the route because I think any event ride, if you do the same route year after year after year, it gets stale. And so we decided to spice it up a little bit and change the route around. Getting the route involved numerous hours of Ben and I driving in our car, going up roads and deciding this one is good and it connects to somewhere we want to go. Or this road is safe because of low traffic, or it crosses major highways or doesn't. And that's how we chose our route.
So your whole route is 100 miles if you do the whole course. I know a lot of times people on an event ride will say, didn't anybody ride their bicycle on this route because you're going up some horrible hill or something? So you talk about, of course, you're going to drive at first because it's so much distance and experimenting with different courses. Did you ride your bike on the course before you did it?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. What we did was we drove the course first, and then invited some friends to road test it with us, and got feedback from them.
So, Ron, you kind of touched on some of the safety issues that you have to consider when you're planning for hundreds of people to be out on these roads. What kinds of things did you talk about? What kinds of roads did you change the route because you wanted it to be more safe?
Well, we wanted to make sure that, it was a fun ride and low traffic, which always aids bicycles and safety. And we wanted to make sure that the sight lines were good when we crossed highways. The very direction of our route is one where we made a lot of right turns, so we made it a clockwise route. Rather than when you make a left turn, of course, you have to cross traffic when you do that. So that's some of the things we thought about.
I hadn't even thought about that. That's interesting. And now your course is a figure-8 course. Why don't you describe your course a little bit, because we haven't even talked about where it starts or where it is or anything. Let's talk about that. Ben?
Well, the ride starts at the Canby Fairgrounds and works its way out through Malala, up Sawtell Road, and then down to Meridian and back into the fairgrounds, where there's a either a normal rest stop or a lunch stop put on by Chris King. And then these 45-mile goes again from the fairgrounds out through St. Paul, out past the Heritage Rose Garden, along the Willamette a little bit, and back to the fairgrounds. So you have multiple terrains that you're going through. You're going through the foothills, and you're going through the area along the river. So you have some very nice areas.
And it's a beautiful route, and those rose gardens too. And there's just, I don't know, it is a great route. So it is a figure-8. So a person can do the easier 45-mile loop or the more difficult 55-mile loop. If you do them both, you've got a century that day.
Right.
But you've got that rest stop at the fairgrounds, which you're fed there. That's a problem.
That was a problem for a few people. They said it was very easy not to get back on their bikes again.
I've heard a lot of that sentiment.
So people just have to tough it out.
That's right. That's right.
I'd like to mention something. When you said the St. Paul stop, if it's okay to mention that Northwest Bicycle Safety Council has manned that St. Paul stop for the last couple of years, and it occurs on the same day as the Sunset Presbyterian Bicycle Safety Fair, so it kind of gets us two teams going in different directions. But the team that we've sent to the Pioneer Century, who've worked that rest stop, thoroughly enjoy interacting with the riders that come in. And one of the comments that they've heard is that has been a very fun ride. It used to be kind of like a precursor to the STP. If you were going to do the Seattle to Portland, this would have been the ride to go out on to get you kind of ready for that. Isn't that right?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
A lot of people do use it as a training ride.
Yeah, I think that this ride, the Pioneer Century, being in early June and STP being in mid-July, this is a good time for people to see if they can do 100 miles. And it's relatively easy. There is some climbing on the 55, but it's just kind of a long, gradual climb, beautiful views, and then a great descent. So yeah, any of these event rides can be training rides for a ride that's further down the road for you. Now, speaking of rest stops, what's involved in planning a rest stop for an event ride?
Well, lining up, if you're lucky enough to get a major sponsor, Chris King being ours, and doing a lunch of some sort. At rest stops, you need to have adequate food for people. So you're doing a lot of purchasing. You're anticipating how many cases of bananas you're going to need, how many dozen bagels. One thing that we did this year was we had various organizations setting up canopies, so to give it more of a fair type of a setup. And we've been communicating with those folks and just kind of getting all the ducks in a row at this point.
So at a rest stop like St. Paul, where it's along the course and it's just a place for people to use porta potties and get food, what kinds of foods do you like to provide? What do people comment on as far as food at a rest stop?
Fruit is I think, the biggest thing that people like. It's quick energy, it's easy, it's easily digested. The other things that we have, of course, are all the snackies and crackers and bagels and peanut butter and all the quick energy foods that cyclists like to have.
I think it helps you guys being cyclists. I've been on rides where non-cyclists organize the ride, and bless their hearts, they just don't put out the right kinds of food. They just don't put out enough food. So it's good that you guys ride also. So you're thinking they need protein, they need sugar, they need salt, Gatorade, water. You really think of everything.
Yes, even the placement of our stops. In most rides, I mean, you have to figure that after this hill they're going to need water. You don't want people to bonk, so you have to have food at regular intervals, as you know. I mean, you have to, on a 100-mile ride, eat regularly or you will run out of energy and bonk.
Yeah. So you described, I was going to ask you to define what bonking means for people that might not know. And yeah, you kind of said.
Well, bonking, I mean, the term comes from the helmet hitting the ground and actually making the noise. But when you don't drink or don't eat, you find yourself, your body finds itself so deprived that it will give out.
So again, the benefit of an event ride is you pay some money, but hopefully well-placed stops, the appropriate food items to eat, and water and things, and so you can make it through the ride. And of course, there's the porta potties. What's involved in getting porta potties for an event ride?
Trying to figure out how many.
Yeah.
For each stop. Inevitably, you never seem to have enough. But just getting them out there. If you have an event during the summer, lining that up early enough so you can get them, because you're competing against events down at Waterfront Park, various other concerts taking place, and if you don't line that up early, you might not get them. So
how soon do you start planning? When did you start planning the 2009 Pioneer Century?
We started talking about it in December, and the Porto Sands, canopies, and some of the vendors were lined up last week.
So you're really getting started.
Yeah.
Actually, we started thinking about it at the end of June. We took the pictures for our posters at that time.
Ah. Yeah. So again, back to the rest stops. You have a lot of volunteers. Well, at the rest stops and everything. How many volunteers does it take for your event?
About 60 all totaled.
Yeah.
Which is just a one-day event, relatively confined to a pretty small area, really. So 60 volunteers, and where do all those volunteers come from?
Family, friends, club members, mostly.
And what kinds of things do they do? Aside from doing rest stops, what kind of assignments do some of these people have?
We have things like packet stuffing, so people will come prior to the event. The rest stop people, that some are filling water containers with Gatorade or some type of an energy drink. Others are cutting up fruit. They're continually monitoring the tables to make sure there's adequate supplies out there. Then afterwards, you have a full day of cleanup. You've got to clean all your supplies and get them back to the storage unit.
Now, we've got some pictures that are showing now about, is this...
That was the day of, and that was early in the day. That was our registration table.
Okay.
The big canopy on the left is where the registration people were. We had masseuses set up in the buildings off to the right. And that's just, at that moment, there weren't very many folks there because it was early, but you have an ebb and flow. So, and those are some of the canopies of the different vendors that were setting up. We invited nonprofits, we invited a couple of commercial vendors, just to let people know what's going on in the bicycle community.
And to give it more of a party atmosphere, a fun atmosphere of different things.
It really did. And you guys kind of had a party afterwards too, didn't you? I mean, after people came in from the route, you guys had drinks and food to eat there?
Yeah, we had food. We also had 2 musicians that were dressed in period outfits. I think there's a photograph of them. And we tried to make it as festive an occasion as possible.
And it really was.
Yeah.
I've worked some of those where you were talking about cutting up fruit and everything, and I saw watermelon, and I saw in one of these when we previewed these pictures that watermelon seems to be a big theme during the summer rides, event rides.
People love watermelon.
Yes, they do.
It's it's a delicious fruit to eat.
And on a ride, you can eat it, drink it, and wash your face at it.
All at the same time.
I'm not riding with you, Bruce. Well, and I wanted to point out, too, that you have SAG support, SAG being vehicles that go on the route and pick people up if they run into trouble, if they have mechanical problems or physical problems, get them loaded up and get them back to the start. I think that's a big part of an event ride.
Yeah, people need to know that there's some additional security out there for them. We can't be there if someone gets a flat. The probability is good that someone will show up within a few minutes.
Right.
And if they have a floor pump, makes it a lot easier for them. They can get on the road quicker.
Right. And I think that enables people that might not feel quite so secure to come on out and do these rides, because somebody will help you.
Yes.
You should be self-sufficient, but somebody can help you.
I think that I agree. That is one of the things about doing an event ride. You know you're going, if it is a good event ride, you're going to be taken care of.
Well, we're going to take a quick break here. Bruce is going to do our event corner this evening, and then we're going to come back to Ron and Ben and talk some more about event rides and planning event rides. So, Bruce, why don't you go ahead?
Well, thank you, Ann. And I'll tell you, I'm learning a lot as we go along. Even though I have worked event rides before, to plan one and organize one is a totally different matter. An awful lot of work goes into that. Well, I would like to talk about some of our new and emerging riders. I had a conversation today with a young woman who has 3 children, and we were at Bethany Village, one of my hangouts, and a lot of my bicycle rides start from there. My favorite coffee klatch group is up there at Bethany Village. But one thing that was interesting is that she asked a question about her 12-year-old son out riding and how does he learn to go out on his own and become a safe rider. He rides around the neighborhood right now. He'd like to venture out a little more. Well, the one thing that I would offer is first, make sure that a child 12 years or at any age at least knows the rules of the road and the bicycle laws, because they do apply to them if they're going to ride out on the roadway. The first one and the biggest one is to know that the law requires anyone under the age of 16 to wear a helmet or protective gear as defined by the state of Oregon as to what that is. And the thing of it is that the helmet should be a safe helmet. It should be a safety rated helmet, which most are. It should fit the person pretty good, and you can get those helmets free, and you can buy helmets relatively cheap. They're stylish, and you can encourage your child to wear those because it is a law and it will help keep them safe. There are events throughout the year that you can look up on websites. You can look up on our websites where a kid could go and get a free helmet fitting. You can get your helmet, a damaged helmet, replaced, or if the helmet has been lost, you could get a new helmet. There are also places where you could get the bikes looked at and maybe have some safety inspections. Those are also included. There are organizations out there that do that. There's all kinds of ways to connect your young kid who is wanting to venture out on longer rides, and you want to be able to trust them to go out on their own, maybe commute to school. The Safe Routes to School programs, you can look those up. The Bicycle Transportation Alliance is a place to go to get some information on that. You might want to take a ride with your kid and talk over these rules and laws and know as a parent what things you need to know to keep your child safe out there. Family rides are good. Portland Wheelman Touring Club and other bicycle groups have family rides that will start sometime in the late spring. You might also look for some of these rides where they are a little bit longer duration. If you have a strong rider in the family, they may want to do a welcome ride, one of those rides that are for the new rider and new and emerging rider. I wanted to point out a few things that not only kids need to know, but bicyclists who are adults out there riding, and that is the law requires you to signal. And the reason I'm bringing that up, because I have noticed that oftentimes you find that motor vehicles may not signal, but more often you don't see as many bicyclists signaling. The law requires you to do so. What do you want to know about that? You can find out in the Oregon Bicyclist Manual. It has laws and rules in here. It has some of the ORSs in here that give you enough information that you can go out and ride your bike safely and reach your destination safely. There's a statement that was made by the BTA about a year ago that I happen to agree with, that cycling in Oregon is safer now than it ever has been. And the reason being is there's more awareness because we have more riders on the road. And we have more riders on the road doing it safely. It's kind of nice when you're out riding around and that you see everyone interacting, whether it's a motor vehicle or whether it's a bike rider who is driving their bike on the roadways, cooperating with one another. Things like stop meaning stop. That's going to help keep your child safe. That red means stop. And if there's a stop sign or a traffic light, they're required to stop the same as a motor vehicle. Also, signaling on turns. That's your one form of communication to let other drivers, whether they're driving a motor vehicle or a bicycle, it lets them know what your intentions are. You can signal for a stop, you can signal for right and left turn, but there's also conditions on that. If you were to look up the Oregon Revised Statutes, which are in the Bicyclist Manual, also in the Oregon Driver's Manual, which also has some bicycle law in them, you will find that the ORS, which is Oregon Revised Statutes, will give you information on what a legal stop is, also what the proper way to signal is. And a lot of cyclists I know don't know that because they don't signal. Either they don't know it or they don't care. But these are things that are going to help you have a safe ride out there, but it's also going to help your child. The schools right now are putting on bicycle safety fairs. There are community groups and organizations that have bicycle safety fairs. There's a wealth of information out there. It's fun learning. It's interesting. They have a lot of activity that their child can interact with in those schools that they learn while they're having fun. And that's one thing I like about some of the bike safety fairs and community fairs that are going on today. I would like to read one of my pet peeves, and that is the one that says the bicycle seat, which I didn't know. And when I saw this, I thought, well, this is rather interesting. And it is ORS 814.470, and it's failure to use a bicycle seat penalty. And it says, you can read all the rest of the subsections, but it says a person commits the offense of failure to use a bicycle seat if the person is operating a bicycle and the person rides other than upon or astride a permanent and regular seat attached to the bicycle. Well, that could be of concern. Anne, with her wisdom, said, well, what if the bicycle seat was stolen? Well, generally, that would be a concern of a person who rides with what we call a quick release seat. If you have one of those, I would suggest, as I have seen, that you might want to release that and take that saddle and carry it around with you. But that I found to be a very interesting law because I don't think about that, neither do you, because I always assume that I'm going to ride my bicycle and it's going to have a bicycle seat attached to it. I think it'd be rather uncomfortable if you had kind of an accident with that and no seat. Also, having more passengers on a bicycle than the bicycle permits. That's another one I like. If you're riding a single bicycle, there should only be one person on it. There are, what are those bikes that you ride, Ann?
Tandem.
That's right. There's a tandem for 2 people. I've seen one for 3, up to 5. In fact, there was a bike ride. I can't remember which one it was, but there was a family of 5 that rode on this bicycle, but there was a seat for each one of those people. You're not riding on the handlebars. I would instruct my kids about that you don't want to have kids riding on the back of their bicycle or on the handlebars, because that is not an appropriate way for them to transport someone. If they want to ride with a buddy, learn how to ride a tandem. I think that's a good suggestion. Some of the other concerns that we've had out there are being able to keep up with riders on event rides when you go out to some of these group rides. Well, you know, if you look on the internet and you see a ride that you would like to go out on, and you might make the same mistake or have made the same mistake I did when I first started riding, define the ride that you're going on. If it says that it's a level D ride and that they will travel along at between speeds of 18 and 21 miles an hour, you know, first of all, it's a difficult ride, and number two, it's a very fast ride. I can remember my first riding experience when I showed up and everyone took off, and I go, okay, well, that happened. But if you can identify the ride you're on, that's a very important way to start. That way you get less frustrated. Some bicycle clubs have the reputation of taking off and leaving people, and that's what people are stuck with. But I think that sometimes a person doesn't realize what ride they showed up to. So what you would want to examine is the type of ride. Is it a welcome ride? Is it a family ride? Does it indicate that the ride will ride at 12 to 15 miles an hour? And if you know that you only ride at 10 miles an hour, you may want to look for a different type of ride. There are family rides through community groups. There are family rides through churches. And in fact, our church has family rides every year, and they took a real nice ride this year up to Stubbs Stewart Park, which I thought was a pretty interesting ride. So look up on the websites for family rides. You can plug that into Google, and I'm sure you're going to get an awful lot of them no matter what area you ride in. Now, Ann, we talked about some of the event rides that are filling up. These rides fill up early. Well, you look ahead, plan ahead. Some people want to sign up day of. I have made the mistake myself of waiting to sign up the day of, and the ride is sold out. So sign up early. One ride that I have in mind is the Tualatin Valley Park Foundation hike and bike ride. They have the family rides, they have the little bit new and emerging rider rides, they have hiking, and now they're going to add, as you heard Ann mention, they're going to add a metric century. And so this show is very important to me because I'm the planner and coordinator for this thing, and I'm going to learn an awful lot about that today. So if you want more information, go to www.nwbicyclesafetycouncil.org, and it'll connect you to other groups and organizations. And if you want to know about Wheelman Rides, go to www.pwtc.com. And now back to you, Ann.
Thank you, Bruce. That was very informative, and that seat law was news to me too. I'll keep that in mind about making sure my bicycle has a bicycle seat. That's right. I want to get back to our guests now. Again, we've got Ben Schoenman and Ron Ing, and they are the coordinators of what Portland Wheelman calls the Pioneer Century, and they're telling us what all is involved in organizing an event ride. Bruce was talking about signing up for a ride. So your ride and most event rides have what's called pre-registration, sign-in forms that people send in with their money, get signed up, and then some people just show up on the day of the ride, day of sign-in, and give you their money then. So tell us a little bit about the registrations, and I want you to talk too about, I think it was 2007, where you had hundreds of people sign up before the day of the event, but even more people signed up, if I'm not mistaken, that day. And you really had a lot of people. And how do you plan for that kind of thing?
Well, pre-registration is something that event coordinators dearly love because it gives you an idea beforehand what the size of your group is going to be. And that's why most rides offer a discount for pre-registration. It gives you a base of cyclists, lets you know how much food, t-shirts, all the things that you need to purchase. It gives you an idea of the popularity, how you're going to do. And
that 2007, didn't you have like, say, 600 people sign up before and 700 people sign up that day? That was, how did you deal with that? That's a lot of people trying to get their registration forms filled out, their checks written or whatever.
We knew we could see how the weather was going a few days prior, so it gave us a chance to really scramble. Additional runs to the store, more stuff to add to orders. And then a lot of purchases in Canby at various stores.
So you do make day of purchases then to supplement. Okay,
Yeah.
I hadn't thought about that.
You made somebody's day at a store.
A little different prices than at Costco, I bet.
Yes.
Why, yes.
So again, the idea that you're encouraging people to sign up. What is the price difference for pre-registration as compared to day of? I don't know if you've got your prices in mind for this year, but for last year at least.
What was it, about $5, $7
It was a $5 difference, yes.
Not a whole lot.
So it does pay.
It's an incentive.
Uh-huh.
And that way people can, a lot of people really enjoy having a stuff on their schedule already. Know what their summer's going to look like, when they're going to be in town, when they're heading out.
Yeah, well, and things conflict. Bruce, did you have something?
I have a question. So if you pre-register, you have a chance of getting a T-shirt. But a day of, you're not going to likely have a chance to get a T-shirt, it sounds like.
If there are any left.
So you really could get dregs is what we're talking, or some leftovers, but there wouldn't be a T-shirt there for 700 people. If you had 600 signed up, would you have you wouldn't have additional 700 on hand?
Well, you usually print some extra, and not everyone's going to buy one. But there are some people that just don't get them. You sell out of the larges, say, so their opportunity is gone.
And I know the Pioneer Century is as popular as the Spring Century was, and you get pretty large pre-registration, and that turnout is just immense. That's more than double. That's twice as many as you got in pre-registration. If you got 600 signed up pre-registration and 700 show up the day of.
Yeah, we were thrilled by it.
Now, who was the one that walks around with the headache? You or Ron?
Oh, I think we shared it pretty well.
Ben was in charge of sort of command central, and I was making the runs to the store that year. I made a lot of runs to the store that year, as a matter of fact.
I bet you did.
I can't plead total ignorance because I did work several events for the Wheelmen, and we did have a little fund for a store run, and I'm thinking about the tortured 10,000 and how the day of, it was very overwhelming, and you prepare for that. And the Wheelmen are best at these event rides, if I'm not mistaken.
I know they have a great reputation for the food and the rest stops and just the support, and I think Pioneer is one of them that helps give them that reputation, because I think every rest stop has different food at it,
We've tried to put different food at one rest stop. We had pineapple, one we had blueberries, we had themes, we had Hawaiian hula skirts for everyone, and paper parrots that people could put on their shoulders, just to try and give it a theme, make it a little more playful.
We want it to be fun.
Yeah.
So speaking of fun, let's say that somebody's kind of a new rider, just kind of getting into it. How do they know if they're ready to come out and do a ride like the Pioneer Century? What kinds of things should they consider? And at this time, in January, looking to early June, what kinds of things should they be doing to prepare for a ride like that?
I think a good rule of thumb is if you can comfortably complete 2/3 to 3/4 of the distance that you intend to go, you're going to be fine. And you need to work up to that distance.
Those
Increase
rest
your
stops
distance.
make a difference. I think doing club rides or riding on your own, you don't appreciate how much a rest stop gives you a chance to get off your bike, you refuel, you just get reinvigorated, not to mention the excitement, the energy of a lot of people doing the ride with you, depending on the ride and the size of the ride. That alone gives you a lot of energy and enthusiasm to do the ride as compared to just going out all by yourself and trying to do 62 miles or something.
Definitely. It's way easier to be in a group and ride along. You find yourself riding faster than you thought you could, stronger uphills, because the crowd seems to almost suck you along.
Yeah. Now, again, your course is 2 separate circles making a figure 8, and so your 45-mile is definitely something a novice rider could do. Wouldn't you say? It's pretty easy?
It is easy. There's just one small hill, and it's not even a hill. It's just a little bloop in the road.
Ben, I rode with you once in the Spring Century, and you told me that there was a small hill coming up, and it was Bird Hill. No, do you have anything like that on this ride?
No, there's nothing like Bird Hill. It's a long, sustained climb going up to the Sawtell Rest area. I was trying to inspire you, Bruce.
Well, yeah, you did a pretty good job, because I did make it up with you, that particular ride. I do recall that.
But let's make it clear that the 45-mile loop doesn't have that long sustained climb.
No, it does not.
But the 55-mile loop does. And so if you're just a novice rider, you just do the 45.
The 45 would be perfect for a novice rider, and we're also going to be having a shorter distance of 30 miles this coming year.
Okay.
So that will hopefully attract a wider spectrum of cyclists.
Yeah, and I think we think a century, and so maybe we don't come out to some of these rides, but it's good to read the fine print and realize that most event rides up and down the I-5 corridor have multiple routes. Some from, even like 1 mile family ride up to 100 miles or more. So read the information about the ride to see if there's something there for you.
Yeah,
Make sure you sign up for the right one.
Yeah,
And
know which route you're on.
if someone has any questions about the ride, they can always call a phone number that's listed on the form or on the website.
So you guys have done event rides yourself. You've done, like you mentioned, the Inland Empire. What are some of your pet peeves? Don't name names, but what are some of your pet peeves or things that you've learned on other event rides that you've incorporated into your own Pioneer Century?
Pretzels. There was a ride that we were on, and there was a craving for pretzels. And we mentioned that to people at the rest area. They also had a figure 8 on their ride. And when we came back, they had pretzels waiting for us.
Wow.
It's just the unexpected foods that are the real treats.
Now, lately on event rides, I've noticed burritos. People have burritos from Costco. They slice them up into little bite-sized pieces. I know those were on the rack ride and the tandem rally last year. Did you guys have those?
No, we didn't.
Those are popular.
Well, actually, the reason we didn't was that our center stop, we have
Oh, that's right.
fresh fajitas made last year and the year before from Chris King.
Well,
So-
Ron, this is a good time to talk about that. You have a corporate sponsor in Chris King, so tell us, what is Chris King and what do they bring to your event to make it better?
Chris King is the only component manufacturer in America, made in America. All their stuff is made in America, right here in Portland. They are, their philosophy is to support cycling, so instead of advertising, they support rides. And we happen to be fortunate enough to partner up with them.
And they bring out a gourmet kitchen, literally.
Oh, yes.
And so, and then they make fajitas.
They make chicken fajitas, or they did. I don't know the menu this year. I'm thinking it's going to change, but they made chicken fajitas or portobello mushroom fajitas.
That's right.
As much basically as anybody wanted, and it was the highlight of both centuries, I think. Was
absolutely.
It's just great food.
But again, that's the downfall. As you come in from the 55, you load up on those fajitas, and then you can't get back on the bike to go to the 45. So instead of doing a century that day, you only did 55 miles.
If you have one fajita, go on the 45. You can get back in enough time to have a second one.
And have another one. All right.
But most rides, even Cycle Oregon, you have to know that sometime during the day you're going to have a regular meal and ride after that.
That's true. And if you do it right, if you don't overdo, you feel all the better for it. You do need that real meal. As good as the snacks are at the rest stop, you need real food.
Real food, yes.
Tell us about course marking. Some people don't know what a Dan Henry is, and a lot of times event rides have some sort of marks on the road or on the side of the road to help people, so they don't even need to refer to maybe a map that you might provide, but the course itself is marked. So tell us about course marking, how that's done, what Dan Henrys are.
Dan Henrys are either on, like you said, either on the pavement or a sign that indicate a left, right, straight ahead, or diagonal turn. And usually those are done 2 symbols leading up to the turn, usually about 50 yards back, and then one prior to the turn, and then a confirmation turn. That way people don't have to look at their maps as frequently. They just have to look at the road.
And yeah, and you guys do a good job of that. And some of those you paint. Somebody goes out and paints them. How does that's some of your volunteer work?
Yes, there's a stencil that volunteers go out with, and they have a map of the route, and they are experienced riders, so they know how many to put down, where to locate them, and they do an excellent job.
And like you say, it's helpful when one of those signs is after you actually make the turn, then there's another sign that, oh good, I made the right turn.
It's reassuring, especially for someone who doesn't have a whole lot of experience on roads that they've never been on.
And that's often the case on an event ride, because you're unfamiliar maybe with the area. It's not your own neighborhood frequently.
Right, because a good event ride takes you someplace, I think, that you don't ride all the time.
And I often say doing an event ride on a weekend is like a mini vacation. During your work week, maybe you don't take a real vacation, but it's like a mini vacation that you get around out and explore some new area, and you really get away from work and everything, and just have a lot of fun. And
you're taken care of, you're fed.
Yeah, kind of like a cruise ship, but you have to pedal. And another feature of event rides is usually mechanical support. And you line up the different bike shops, usually from the Portland area, to be at different rest stops. Tell us about that element of an event ride.
Well, we have one at all of our stops, and they do mechanical support, like you say. It is amazing how many people have problems with their bikes. You think your bike's okay, and you get to the ride, and the cable is frayed, or your tires are low, and these guys help you out. We've even had cruising bicycle mechanical support on the rides.
And that worked well?
Oh yes.
So they'd just hopefully come upon somebody in distress and be ready
fix
to
their flat and help them on the road.
Huh, I wasn't really aware of that. Well, that's cool. And let's see, I wanted to ask you,
I think we have a photo up over here with the tent. What's going on over there?
Lakeside Bike was at the start of the ride, and they were helping folks out, get out on the ride safely. And they were out there for many hours. The different bike shops that were at the rest stops put in a lot of hours of very helpful assistance.
So how many bike shops as a rule would you have for, say, 1,300 folks out there?
We had a bike shop at each rest stop. So there were 3 or 4 of them last year.
Why don't you go through the day of the ride? What all, kind of a chronology of what all you guys are doing on the day of the ride. I know sometimes you guys camp out there at the Clackamas County Fairgrounds in Canby, so you are definitely there at the crack of dawn.
What we've done is we have camped out. Volunteers can also camp out. That gives us an opportunity to set everything up on Friday. Makes life a lot easier in the morning. And then we start out with some good strong coffee. There are people waiting to, as soon as the parking lot opens at about 6 in the morning, there are people that are waiting to get in the parking lot and get on the road. So we've got to be ready. We've got volunteers that are parking cars, registration people that are ready. We start out with pastries, and Chris King provides coffee, and to get people motivated and moving. And then people just come in. The registration closes, I believe, at 10 o'clock. So usually between 7:30 and about 9:15, thereabouts, it's very hectic.
But you've got a good base of volunteers at this point.
We've got a lot of people that are real committed to helping, and repeat people. So it's like the people that do registration have done it 2 consecutive years, and they know, we just kind of stand back
Yes, event day is sort of, for the coordinators, just sort of like the test. You've already done all your work. It's sort of out of your hands, except for the last minute emergencies.
So we're just going to do the ride this year.
Well, thank you, Ben and Ron, and I'm sure many of us will be joining you on June 6th for the Pioneer Century, and we look forward to that, and we really thank you for all your planning and all the work you've done.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, and any parting words for our viewers?
Well, I just encourage you to look at some of these event rides. You can go to any bicycle club. They have links to these events. Check them out. Mark your calendars. Set some out in front of you to be a goal or a training ride for some other ride.
If you want information about our show or any event rides or connect to the cycling community, you can look us up at www.nwbicyclesafetycouncil.org. And if you want to contact the Wheelman and take a look at some of the event rides they have, you can get to the Wheelman on the Northwest Bicycle Safety Council website or by going to www.pwtc.com. Want to thank our special guest. I've learned quite a bit because, you know, it must be quite a shock to say you're going to go out and plan an event ride. Maybe you're going to have a few hundred people there, and all of a sudden 1,200 show up. Happy on one end, but you got to scurry on the other. This is Bruce Buffington and
Morrow
saying thank you for tuning in. Obey all traffic laws. Be aware of your surroundings. Drive with care. Take care of one another, and have a safe. Come on up, Phil. You can just come straight up.